We're going to begin today with Officer Thompson, of course, was still on the stand, and he will certainly still remain sworn and be on the stand as we embark on our field trip. I guess you could call it, for lack of a better word, a better term. I want to give the media instructions here because I'm really concerned about the sanctity of my jury. Supreme Court of Mississippi passed rules regarding electronic media coverage, and absolutely no cameras will be allowed at the scene that we're going to except those that are in the pool with NBC and AP still camera. There'll be no cell phones allowed. I don't want any cell phone pictures, so no media is going to be allowed to have their cell phones or any other type of electronic device. You will also be kept in an area under the guard of our bailiffs and deputies to be certain that you don't crowd the jury and you don't crowd the scene. I don't know if you'll be able to hear the proceedings or not. I'm sorry if you're not. Nothing I can do about that. There will be some audio equipment down there. Our court reporter will have an audio engineer with her that will have a camera, but it's for audio purposes only. Camera will have a lens cap on it. Then that's just so that we can be certain that we get a good record of this proceeding. The media will be going down. I understand that you've already been instructed about how to, you'll be going down there in caravan. Is that correct, Mr. McLeod?
Yes, sir.
All right. And your spectators are welcome to go. If you get blocked off, I understand that the roads will be blocked. If you get blocked off again, I'm sorry. Just nothing I can do about that. But I guess they can follow as closely as they want. This will still be open court down there when we stop and have these proceedings. So you need to understand that the rules of court will still be in full force and effect. Anything else? All right, so we will now proceed to call the jury in, and we will go from there. Good morning. I trust you all have followed my instructions and have not discussed the case among yourselves. Am I correct? You ready for your field trip? Got your tennis shoes on? Okay, I'm joking. I hope you have some comfortable shoes. There will be some walking involved. I'm required under our rules to once again inform you that no members of the jury will be recorded or shown at any time on camera or any other place. No portions of your body, no pictures of your feet, nothing will be recorded of you while we're outside the presence, while we're outside this courthouse. So I want you to understand that I'm required by the rules to tell you that. So I'm telling you on the record again. Again, this proceeding will be just like we're in court. You will not be allowed to ask questions. Mr. Thompson will be the witness, and he will be questioned by the state, and then he will be cross-examined by the defense. And then when it will make 5 different stops. Once that's completed, we're going to come back to the courtroom and resume just like we have the last several days. So with that, I'm going to put you in charge of the bailiffs, and we will take you to your vans, and we will proceed to these various places that were identified for you yesterday. All right.
Everyone remain seated.
Sandy, come on.
Okay.
Okay. I didn't know if there was
I thought there was 5 things on the map yesterday. That's where I got the number 5.
Oh, yes, sir. We're going to the jail too.
Okay. All right. My mistake.
No, that's fine. Just clearing it up.
Thank you. Thank you. Jury back in and continue the trial. The jury was taken today to the various points of the scene of this incident already in evidence concerning the location. First location was the jail, Panola County Jail. Before this trial began and all during this trial, I have steadily cautioned the media and reminded them of the rules of this court and of the rules of the Supreme Court concerning camera coverage and media coverage. In my presence today at the jail, those rules were willfully violated by a member of the press. I took immediate action. I confiscated the camera. It appeared to me that the camera was taking a picture of the jury, which was absolutely and strictly forbidden. And I confiscated the camera, and thereafter brought the camera into my chambers, where the camera operator removed the card. Well, first of all, he replayed what was on the card for me, and I think I left it in there on the desk, the card. And clearly on the card was images of the jury, which is strictly forbidden. Of course, apologies were forthwith given and accepted by the court, but they were in direct violation of the court's order. Mr. Pupora, this court's going to charge you with contempt, sir. I will now give you the opportunity, if you'd like to come forward, I will now give you the opportunity to purge yourself of contempt and offer any defense that you might want to assert, sir.
Come forward, sir. Need you to raise your right hand and be sworn, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give involving this case is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes. I apologize, Your Honor. I was confused about the situation, and it was an unintentional action on my part. I did not mean to violate the rule.
Is that all?
That's all, sir, and I apologize again.
All right. Court's going to find you in willful contempt of court for violating this court's order, which is strictly enforced. I'm going to fine you the sum of $100. I'm going to sentence you to 30 days in jail, which I'm going to suspend. You violate my orders again, I will revoke the 30 days, and you will spend 30 days in the Panola County Jail if you violate my orders again. You understand me, sir?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, sir. You can pay the clerk before you leave today and purge yourself of contempt, sir. Thank you. I'm going to make sir, come forward, please. I have something else to ask you. I need to know if there's any memory in that camera.
There is not.
There's no memory?
No.
So this is the only memory in that camera. I hold in my hand this card.
That is the only.
There's nothing on iCloud, nothing in any type of memory whatsoever. So those images are forever gone except right here in this card that I'm holding.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. This will be Exhibit 1 All right. Anything further before I bring the jury in?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Bring the jury in, please. Have you all followed my instructions and not discussed the case among yourselves? All right, great. All right. Mr. Hale, you may call your next witness. So you want to turn Mr. Thompson to stand?
Your Honor, we're going to ask Mr. Thompson to stand down, and we're going to recall him at a later time.
All right. The defense understand that you will be given full right of cross-examination of Mr. Thompson at the appropriate time. You understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. May I call your next witness?
Your Honor, before we call our next witness, during the quote-unquote field trip, we actually went to M&M's convenience store. Detective Brian Arnold actually went and retrieved the hard drive from that store's video surveillance system for December 6, 2014 and prior. We provided a clone of the hard drive that was provided by ATF. It is also contained inside of a DVR system that we would offer into evidence by stipulation. We've already entered an order in regards to the stipulation of the hard drive. I'll provide a power cord and a monitor for the jury in later viewing.
Is that correct,
That is correct, Your Honor.
All right, then the stipulation will be noted and that will be marked as an exhibit. Ladies and gentlemen, typically in a trial like this, parties are aware of what the other side has as evidence. We don't have trial by ambush anymore. Both sides pretty well know what evidence is there. And a lot of times, in order to save your time and the court's time, parties will stipulate to the existence of certain things. And these stipulations mean that both sides are agreeing to a certain thing. They're agreeing that this hard drive can be introduced into evidence, so you're to accept that as they've agreed to it, so you're to accept that as evidence, all right? I'll give you a written instruction on that at a later time, but right now I just wanted to explain to you exactly what a stipulation was and how you're to treat it, all right? All right, thank you.
Mary Beth Hall.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give involving this case is the truth and the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
All right, Mr. Champion.
What is your name?
Mary Beth Hall.
And Mary Beth, where are you employed?
I'm employed with UT Regional 1 Physicians at the Burn Center at Regional 1 Health in Memphis, Tennessee.
In what position do you? What position do you hold?
Nurse
with-
practitioner.
And explain to the jury just real quick, as a nurse practitioner, what do you do at the burn unit at the med?
Nurse practitioner, I work under the supervision of the attending physician. Help make decisions regarding patient care, but it is under supervision. So any major decisions usually pass it through the physician for their approval. Then we take care of our patients.
Would you give the jury, please, the benefit of your background and education?
Education, graduated from University of Memphis 2005 with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. I returned a few years later to start for a Master's of Science in Nursing and Advanced Practice. Finished that degree in May of 2012, at which point I was working as a registered nurse in the Burn Center. The position was available to work as a nurse practitioner there. Applied and started working as a nurse practitioner in August of 2012.
How long have you actually been working at the Regional 1?
Regional 1 started in May of 2005 in the emergency room and then transferred March 2006 to the Burn Center.
Approximately how many, just a wild guess if you need to, but approximately how many burn patients can you estimate that you have dealt with over the course of your roughly 11 years?
Don't know if I could give you an accurate number. We have a 14-bed unit that stays full majority of the year. We operate our own emergency room, see anywhere from maybe no patients one day to 6-7 patients in a shift.
So it's many, is it?
Many.
Many would be?
Many.
Your Honor, I would offer Ms. Hall as an expert in the field of nurse practitioner, more focalizing on the burn unit.
The defense care to voir dire the witness on her qualifications as an expert nurse practitioner in the burn field?
No, sir.
You stipulate that she is a qualified expert in that field?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right.
Ms. Hall, were you on duty on the late evening hours of December the 6th of 2014?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall being notified that a patient was being flown in from the Pinova County area?
Yes.
Tell the jury a little bit about what happens and how you're notified and what steps y'all take at that point to prepare for the patient?
I was actually notified by two sources. One was the attending physician. That was the one who received a call that we were getting a scene flight. Patient was coming directly from the area instead of coming as a transfer from another facility or hospital. Also received a call from our medical communications that we had a helicopter en route with a burn that was a greater than what they were calling a 90%, so a large area burn.
And what did that tell you to expect?
What to expect, we would probably need to have our ER set up, ventilator at the bedside. Usually with burns that size, they're intubated or we need to make sure that airway breathing is okay. Have equipment set up for debridement dressings, have things available for vascular placement for lines so we can give fluids, medications.
Okay, let's stop. You said some big words. I know what they mean, but some of the jurors might not. So you said intubate. What does that mean?
Intubate, make sure that there's an airway present, that she's breathing okay. When you have big burns like that involve a face or a neck, which we were told greater than 90%, there's not a lot that's not involved. Need to make sure that we're able to provide for her as best as we can, so we'll make sure that she's able to breathe.
And
How we can do that for her.
And how do you go about doing that?
How we go about doing that, usually we'll get a basic report from the helicopter who's bringing the patient, and they'll tell us, okay, try to give us a basic assessment so we can be prepared. And then once they hit the door, we're able to better assess that situation.
Okay. How do you go about intubating somebody?
Intubating, we look to see when the patient comes in, does it look like there's airway, mouth, throat involvement? And then we have an anesthesia team that will come and intubate or place that breathing tube for us.
And then you also said getting vascular.
IV access, or some people call it a line or an IV, a way that we can give her fluids, medication while she is with us.
So you began to do all of these things in preparation for who was later identified to you as Jessica Chambers. I assume she was later identified to you as Jessica Chambers. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes.
And you were doing all of these things in preparation for her arrival at the Regional 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tell the jury, please, what you observed when Jessica arrived at the burn unit.
When she came in, she was covered in towels, so we moved her from the helicopter stretcher over to our trolley, which is a metal table. We took the towels off, assessed her, know that she had burns. Face, neck, chest, back, arms, legs. So it wasn't burn on her, it was mostly the bottom of her feet and her buttocks and groin. So
Were they pretty severe?
pretty severe. Lots of third degree, maybe some deep second degree burns.
Okay. Now, if you don't mind, explain to the jury what's the difference between a second degree and a third degree burn.
Okay, I'll start with our first degree burns. There's the skin is red, but it's still intact, it hurts. Second degree burns, there's blistering. Underneath that blister, maybe pink, maybe red. And then you have your third degree burns, which is the skin is broken and it's white.
Okay. And typically third degree burns are tend to be very deep, is that correct?
Yes, you've gone through the layers of the skin, so they're also called a full thickness burn.
When Jessica arrived and you did your assessment, what did y'all attempt to do at this point?
We came in, everybody's assessed for airway, breathing, circulation, they'll call it the ABCs. We came in with an airway. She did have an airway placed in the helicopter, but we were not able to ventilate very well. So we called anesthesia to come and replace that airway, and also the attending was here.
All right, let me ask you, why were you not, or why was the airway that she already had in her not working?
It was probably wasn't so much the airway, it was just the burns on her chest were so deep you could not expand. You have patients that are on an ambu bag to deliver oxygen when a tube is placed, but the tissue couldn't stretch and move, so every time they tried to give her air, it just wouldn't go.
And so you called, I believe you said you called a surgical team or an anesthesiologist?
My attending was available. He was actually present when she arrived. He made some incisions on her chest called an escharotomy. That way the chest was able to expand. So the anesthesia team had replaced her breathing tube with an endotracheal tube, and we were able to ventilate her.
Now the jury here before too long, we'll see some photographs of what appear to be cuts on the body of Jessica. Is that what you're describing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what do those cuts allow the body to do?
Body allows, one, for blood flow, because usually when things are that tight, the blood is not flowing, and also for the skin to expand and stretch.
And these things were done on Jessica?
Yes.
Okay. And what was done next as far as attempting life-saving?
We did place vascular lines in her right femoral cordis, which was basically a large bore IV to give fluids and medication, and also a line in her artery to measure blood pressures.
And how would you assess her status when she came in and you and the attending physician were doing the assessment? How would you assess her, I guess, for lack of a better word?
Could you explain without
Well, I
the
mean,
process?
what were your initial thoughts when you saw her as far as how severely injured she was?
She's critical, and the injuries did not appear to be compatible with life, so.
In other words, you do not believe, you and the attending physician did not believe that she would be able to survive?
Rephrase your question, please.
Did you and the attending physician discuss her condition?
We did, and it was just determined with the depth of the burn, the surface area involved, that it was not a survivable injury.
And were you also talking with Dr. William Hickerson?
The attending talked with Dr. Hickerson, but I did not personally speak with him that night, but the attending that was there did speak with him.
And who is he?
Michael Van Vliet.
And who is Dr. Henderson?
Dr.
Hickerson.
They were both the attendings. They were partners at the burn center.
Okay. And I believe Dr. Hickerson is actually in charge of the burn unit now, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when you began looking at the burns, what did you think about them? I mean, the extent of the burns and the depth of the burns, what were you thinking at this point?
They were deep. It looked as if she was either unaware of what was happening, that they were deep, or could not get away to try to fight off this injury. A lot of times when something happens that hurts or stuns, you try to get away, and hers were deep enough to where it's like, wow.
Okay. So she was either unaware that she had been burned.
Again, I would object to leaving.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I think counsel merely repeating as a preface to his next question what the witness has already testified to. It'll be overruled.
If I understand your answer, the first thing that came to your mind was that she was either unaware that she had been burned or was in a place that she really couldn't get out of. Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir.
And what did y'all do at this point when you made the decision or the assessment that these were not survivable injuries?
We went to speak with her family to let them know, and then we started what we would call a comfort care. So we put her on some morphine drip, Versed drip, to keep her comfortable until she passed away.
Was she conscious when she got to y'all?
No, she was moving, but nothing to command. If we said squeeze hands or kick your feet, she did not do any of that.
And what did that tell you? Or what, just I guess from your training, when a patient is not able to respond to your commands in the condition that she was in, what does that tell you?
It's hard to describe. Everybody's a little different, but
Well, let's just look at this particular case. You said that the injuries she had were non-survivable.
mm-hmm.
Was that an indication to you that she was in pretty critical condition?
Yes.
And when you discuss comfort care, did y'all put any kind of bandages or wraps on her?
Yes, we did clean her as best as we could. We did wrap her Curlex and Ace wraps to both arms, both legs. We did put a burn dressing on her chest and arm, or chest and back. No apologies.
And what was the reason y'all did all that?
Wounds will drain, and she'll be wet. More so for family and for her.
Everybody want to hand you a photograph and ask you to look at that for me, please. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what is that?
It's the patient that came in. She is wrapped. So she has her dressings, Foley catheters in her bladder. She has her airway in. You can still see the burns to her face and her neck.
And these are the wraps that you were talking about
Yes.
just a minute ago.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I would offer this as an exhibit to this witness's testimony.
Any objection?
None, Your Honor.
All right, it's so marked and admitted.
Ready, Captain? Ms. Hall, as a part of what you do at the Met, are records kept of what procedures that y'all do, or what treatments that you provide, or what medicines that you give, and things like that?
Yes.
Okay, and have you had a chance, I believe when we met earlier, you had a chance to go through the records that were provided us by the Met on Jessica Chambers, is that
Yes.
correct? Would you just review that real quick, please, and tell me if you recognize that?
Yes.
And what do you recognize those to be?
Orders from her emergency room. There's a drawing of the burn. There's nursing records. There's the discharge summary.
And all that's consistent with what y'all normally keep in the course of business there at the Med,
Yes.
or at the Regional One. Your Honor, I'd offer these records as an exhibit to this witness's testimony.
All right, any objection?
No objection.
Being no objection, be marked and admitted. Those med records?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mary Beth, I would ask you to turn to what I call page 6.
Okay. Okay.
At the top, I believe it says clinical notes report, top right.
Okay.
And if you look down toward the bottom, it says note, and there's a paragraph written. Are we on the same page?
Yes, this one?
Yeah.
Yes.
When we look at the report, it says in there, unable to obtain O2 sat. What does that mean?
We obtain oxygen saturations, which is the O2 sat, usually by sticking a probe with a red light on it on your finger. Her burns were deep enough to her arms and hands, and she was also, the skin was cold. To
She
where
was
it-
missing what now? I'm sorry. You need to speak up for me just a little
Sorry.
bit.
She was, the burns were deep enough on her arms and hands, and the skin was also cold to where that monitor would not pick up. Tried fingers, tried toes, tried her ears, but the burns were deep to where it could not pick up that saturation.
And that's where you say in there have tried several areas. Is that
Yes.
what you mean? Okay.
Yes.
And then you say including change to a different form of pulse oxygen BP. What does that mean?
At this time, we had different types of pulse ox probes. We had some that that are the babies use in the NICU that you can wrap around their foot. We have those. Sometimes the adhesive is a little bit better on those than the ones that we were using. So we had some of those also along with the ones that we kept on the unit.
Okay. And then your next, it says BP has dropped MAP in 40s. What does that mean?
Her blood pressure had dropped. The mean arterial pressure dropped to the 40s. It's usually a sign that her perfusion is not as well. You usually want that number to be about 60 to 65.
When you say perfusion, now what do you mean?
How the blood is flowing to the body.
Okay. So that's an indicator that her blood is not flowing within the body.
Yeah, and things were starting to shut down when that blood pressure starts to go down.
Okay. And then I believe your next note in there is that the family is called in from the critical care waiting room to allow a visit. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is this the point where you advised them that there just wasn't much more that y'all could do?
Yes.
Okay. And then the next notes that you have in there are where she, you described a minute ago where you made her comfortable. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you flip over, I believe it's 2 pages, there appear to be 2 body shapes.
Okay.
And it says Lund and Browder at the top.
Yes.
What is that?
London Browder, it's how we estimate the burn surface area that's involved.
Okay. And the colored in portions on the 2 bodies, or the 2 body shapes, what do the colored portions mean?
The colored portions represent the depth of the burn. The top half of her body, basically from waist up, was dark to represent that it was a full thickness injury. Waist down, those were darkly shaded, not all the way colored in, to represent a deep partial thickness or second degree burn.
Okay. So if we're looking at the top where the darker colors are, that indicates 3rd degree deep burns.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as we go down to the bottom portion of the legs area, that indicates a 2nd degree burn.
Yeah, a deep second degree burn. There's actually on the key for a partial thickness or superficial partial thickness and versus a deep partial thickness.
And then the areas around, on the left, there's a white area, and then on the right, there's a white area. And those are the areas you indicated where there were no burns?
There were no burns on those
In our
areas.
vaginal area, in our buttocks area?
Yes, sir.
And that's represented on this chart. So what portion of her body, and this London Browder gives you an idea about the portion of her body that was burned and then the thickness of the burn. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what was your final assessment as to the amount of her body that had been burned?
93%.
At some point, Ms. Chambers passed away. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you have your notes indicated what time that was?
They do. 2:36 in the morning. 2:36 in the morning.
Okay. Was her family with her?
Yes.
Head to the witness, Your Honor.
All right, cross.
No cross, Your Honor.
All right, what instructions would you give this witness, Mr. Champion?
Ms. Hall may be fine excused, Your
All
Honor.
right, ma'am, you're fine and excused. You can leave the courtroom or you may stay, your choice.
Thank you.
May I call your next witness?
approach, Your Honor.
You may.
Now the state calls Dr. Aaron Barnhart.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give involving this case is the truth, full truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please walk forward with us.
Would you state your name for the record, please?
Yes, Dr. Aaron Barnhart.
And Dr. Barnhart, where are you currently employed?
I am currently the Chief Medical Examiner in Galveston County, Texas.
And on December the 8th of 2014, where were you employed?
I was employed in Jackson, Mississippi as the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner for the state of Mississippi.
And as a medical examiner, do you perform what I am going to refer to as autopsies?
I do?
And did you in fact perform an autopsy on the body of Jessica Chambers?
Yes.
And can you give us the benefit of your education and experience as a pathologist?
Yes. I have a Bachelor of Science degree from Texas Christian University in biology. I attended medical school at the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston, Texas, and received a medical doctorate. I then completed residencies in anatomic and clinical pathology at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas. I then completed a fellowship in forensic pathology at Miami-Dade County Medical Examiner's Office in Miami, Florida. I then returned to Galveston and completed a second fellowship in surgical pathology. And subsequent to that, I was employed in Mississippi.
And during your employment in Mississippi, have you been certified as an expert in forensic pathology in numerous local, state, and federal courts?
I have.
Your Honor, at this time, I would tender Dr. Barnhart as an expert in the field of forensic pathology.
All right. Does defense care to voir dire the doctor on her qualifications as an expert in the field of forensic pathology?
No, sir, Your Honor.
You would stipulate she is an expert in that field?
Yes, sir, Your Honor.
All right.
Dr. Barnhart, would you please describe for the jury what an autopsy entails?
Yes. So an autopsy is a post-mortem examination, meaning it's a physical examination performed on a deceased person, the purpose of which is to ascertain the cause and manner of death. So generally, the autopsy is divided into two main parts. The first would be the external examination. That's when we look at someone's distinguishing characteristics, hair color, eye color, any identifying features like tattoos or scars. Of course, we also look for external injuries. After that, and after documentation of the external exam, we then move on to the internal exam, wherein the internal organs are removed, and each of them are examined for evidence of natural disease or injury.
And did you in fact do that in this case?
I did.
And did you conduct an external and an internal examination of Jessica Chambers?
I did.
And were you able to produce a cause and manner of death for Jessica Chambers?
I was.
And did you complete a comprehensive report of your findings from your autopsy?
Yes.
And did they include toxicology?
Yes.
May I approach you with?
You may.
Dr. Barnhart, I've handed you a document. Can you describe and identify that document for me?
Yes, this is an autopsy report that was produced and signed by myself. Attached to it is a toxicology report, which I reviewed but was produced by an outside lab. And also attached is the report of death investigation, which I believe would have been completed by the coroner. And that's generally the information that we have prior to conducting the autopsy exam. There's also a provisional, or what we call PAD, provisional autopsy diagnosis sheet that would have been completed by me on the day of the autopsy.
Now proceed, Your Honor.
You may.
Dr. Barnhart, I'm going to again hand you the same document. I took out the items that were prepared by the coroner. I don't think they had any use to you, is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, we generally like to see them, but it's not prepared by us, no.
So what you have in front of you is your report along with the toxicology that you sent on.
Correct.
Your Honor, I would ask that her expert report be marked and received as an exhibit.
Any objection?
None, Your Honor.
All right, be so marked and admitted.
Dr. Barnhart, tell the jury again how you began your examination.
We began with an external examination.
And did you in fact conduct an external examination of Jessica Chambers?
Yes.
And were you able to determine a height and weight for Ms. Chambers?
Yes, we measured her at 64 inches and 104 pounds.
So that'd be 5'4" by my calculation.
Yes.
You also noted other things in your external examination, tattoos that are going to be depicted in the pictures. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in the second paragraph, second line, you noted the external genitalia are those of a normal adult female and are atraumatic. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you did not deserve any trauma to that region of Jessica Chambers.
No, I did not.
And let me ask you, did you perform a full inspection of Jessica Chambers? A full examination of Jessica Chambers?
Externally, yes. And internally, I'm sorry.
Did you find any evidence that, and I'm going to use the term that will come out later, any evidence that she might have been on her period?
No.
What evidence would you have been looking for that?
Well, most frequently, it would be evidence of some type of sanitary product, like a maxi pad or a tampon, neither of which were present.
Thank you. Now, you also, as part of your external examination, have a paragraph that includes evidence of injury. Is that correct?
I do, yes.
Would you please note the injury that you documented to the body of Jessica Chambers?
Yes, she had third-degree burns on her face, scalp, neck, chest, and back. And she had second and third-degree burns on her arms, and second-degree burns of her legs. The areas that were not burned were essentially the groin area, the buttocks, the back of the upper thighs, and the bottoms of the feet.
So the only areas that weren't burned were those areas?
Yes,
The buttocks, the groin, the back of her thighs, and the bottoms of her feet.
yes.
did you calculate a percentage of her body that was damaged by second and third degree burns?
I did, and it's just an estimate, but I calculated 93% total body surface area burns.
As you conducted an internal examination, did you find other evidence of injury?
I did. There was soot and carbonaceous material in her larynx and trachea or airways.
Would you describe for the jury, just so they're aware, what else you did in your internal examination of Jessica Chambers?
So for the internal examination, each of the organs is removed. That includes the organs of the chest, so the heart and lungs, the organs of the abdomen, which would include things like the liver, spleen, kidneys, stomach, pancreas, adrenal glands, reproductive organs, bladder, intestines. We remove the brain as well, and that's generally what comprises the internal examination.
And during the rest of your internal examination, did you find anything significant in regards to Jessica Chambers' autopsy?
No, otherwise, aside from her injury, she was completely healthy.
During the course of your autopsy, do you take photographs?
We do, yes.
And are those particular photographs turned over with your autopsy report to law enforcement, and hopefully our office?
I believe so, yes.
Don't.
Step over here, step over here. I'm gonna do the two of the body first, then I'll do the face and then.
Dr. Barnhart, I'm going to show you a board. Does this board contain photographs from your autopsy?
It does.
And how are you able to determine that they were from your autopsy?
The small gray rectangle with the case number, our case number is ME14-1357, is present in each of the photographs.
And what do these photographs, what part of Jessica Chambers' body do they depict?
They show her back, her buttocks, and the back of her legs.
And is the buttocks area the sparing you were referring to?
It is, yes.
Your Honor, I would offer this board and these three documents as exhibit to this witness's testimony.
Your objection?
No.
All right, be so marked and admitted.
Your Honor, my permission to stand here.
Move over here.
Dr. Barnhart, you mind stepping down for a second? Dr. Barnhart, as you testified to your external examination, again, are these pictures from a different angle of the body of Jessica Chambers?
Yes, this is the front of her body.
And does that include the sparing that you referred to of her feet?
It does, yes. So you can see the sparing of the soles of her feet here, and she's covered for modesty's sake, but you can see that there's some sparing of this area of the groin here.
And are these photographs that you took at your autopsy?
They are.
Now, did you in fact take a photograph of Jessica Chambers' face as it appeared to you on December 8, 2014?
I believe we would have, yes.
Dr. Barnhart, back around you. I'm going to show you a photograph. Can you describe and identify this photograph for me?
Yes, this is a photo of Jessica Chambers' face.
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask these photographs be marked and received in evidence.
Any objection? All right, be so marked and admitted. 227.
Dr. Barnhart, is this the condition that Jessica Chambers' face was in when she was presented to you on December the 8th of 2014?
Yes.
Is this a photograph taken during the course of your autopsy?
Yes.
And finally, you referenced that you found some internal injuries to Ms. Chambers. Is that correct?
To her airway, yes.
Okay, and describe those injuries that, as you did in your autopsy report.
So there was grayish black soot and carbonaceous material, much like ash or something like that, that was coating the inside of her nose, mouth, and was present in her airways.
And did you take a photograph of that material that was in her airways?
As I recall, yes.
And do you have to actually cut her airway out?
We did, yes.
And I believe you place it on a cutting board and open it up.
Yes,
And then you document or photograph that injury.
correct.
Dr. Barnhart, the last photographs I'm going to show you, can you describe and identify this photograph for me?
Yes, that is a photograph of the larynx and trachea taken at the time of autopsy.
And just so I'm familiar, which is the top and which is the bottom?
This is the top here, so your tongue, for reference, would be here.
Hold on, I tell you what. Your Honor, at this time, may I offer this photograph into evidence?
Any objection?
No.
All right, be so marked and admitted.
Well, Dr. Barnhart, I don't need you to describe it to me. For the jury, can you describe which is the top and which is the bottom area of the airway?
Yes, so the top is here, where my hand is. So for reference, your tongue would be here, going down into the airway. This is the epiglottis. These are the vocal cords. This is the larynx here. And here where it bifurcates is where you would go into your lungs on either side. So it's been separated from the tongue, separated from the lungs. And this mucosal surface is generally a pale tannish pink color when it's healthy. You can see that here it's quite red, and there is this gray-black material present throughout the airway.
What is that gray-black material?
It's essentially soot.
And would that be consistent with the burns that you saw throughout her body?
Yes, it's consistent of soot and smoke inhalation, yes.
Dr. Barnhart, you can have a seat on the witness stand. I'm going to lay this down here. We're going to use it with the next witness. Dr. Barnhart, does your testimony here today accurately describe your examination and findings on December the 8th of 2014 when your autopsy of Jessica Chambers?
It does.
And as you stated earlier, during the course of your examination, are you able to determine an expert opinion based on a reasonable degree of scientific certainty as to the cause of death of Jessica Chambers?
Yes, the cause of death was soot and smoke inhalation and thermal injuries.
And how about the manner of death?
Homicide.
Your Honor, I attend to the witness.
Cross?
Good afternoon, Dr. Barnhart.
Hi.
I want to ask first that, well, Your Honor, may I first begin?
You may.
Boards? Darn, if you need it.
You indicated that this would be at the top, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the red areas would indicate that it was more of a healthier area, is that correct?
The area where it's pink is where there's not any soot.
Correct. And so basically soot does not cover the entire area here. It's just in different portions of it. Would you agree with that?
It's in different places, it's patchy, and that's fairly typical.
And I know you indicated something earlier that the pink areas would be more of a healthier area.
Well, we expect it to be, it's a little bit too red in this case, indicating some degree of heat-related injury. It's generally more of a pale pink and tan color.
But you do agree that soot does not, it's not completely black, is what I'm saying. Soot does not cover the entire area.
No, and it generally doesn't.
Where she's standing, we can't even see what she's talking about.
I apologize.
All right, let's go through that exercise again,
Okay.
please, so the jury can see it, please.
I would suggest you actually have Dr. Barnhart come down with it and turn it.
Dr. Barnhart, you may stand down, please, and let's turn the exhibit so the jury can see it. Thank you.
Okay, let's do this again, just to make sure that the jury can see. I was saying that at the top here would be her beginning of the airway, is that correct?
True, yes.
Okay. And this area is more of a pink or red area, an absence of soot and debris, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And as you go down, you see that there are areas that don't have as much soot in it, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so also, I am, Your Honor.
All right.
Dr. Barnhart, there were also, in speaking of where the burns were located again, just without having to look at the pictures again, we know that it basically completely covered her legs in the front, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And her legs in the back, absence the buttocks area?
And upper thighs, yes.
Yes, and upper thighs. And the top portion of her back, correct? That was burned as well?
It was, yes.
Yes. And then in the front as well? The top, the upper torso, that was burned as well?
It was.
And as far as your report reveals that there was no evidence of any blunt force injuries as well?
I did not find any evidence of that, no.
Okay. And then the toxicology revealed that there was a presence of marijuana to some degree?
Yes.
court's indulgence.
Yes, ma'am.
I tend the witness, Your Honor.
Redirect.
There's no dispute in this case that she had marijuana in her system.
According to the toxicology report, she did, yes.
And also nicotine, which would be consistent with cigarettes, cigars, something of that nature.
Correct.
And there were other items found in her. Were those items that would have been administered by medical professionals?
Yes, the other drugs that were present are commonly used for medical purposes.
So for control purposes, only marijuana.
Yes.
Now, she had, I'm not going to pull the board out again, but you described the upper area, and I believe your quote was generally more red than it should be.
Yes.
Would you describe that for the jury?
Yes.
What
so,
you mean?
Right. So a normal tracheal mucosa would be a pale pink, a tan color, and hers was, of course, partially covered by soot, like you saw. The areas that weren't covered by soot were still red and rather swollen, which would be consistent with inhalational injury or inhaling very hot material.
I believe you referred to it as heat injury.
Yes.
Your Honor, I have no further questions from Dr. Barnhart. I would ask you to be finally released. I believe she's flying back home tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Barnhart. You may leave.
Thank you.
Thank you. You got a short witness for me?
I don't anticipate him being short.
All right, I'm going to put the jury in recess for the afternoon, and I'll send for you when we're ready. Thank you. I trust you all have followed my instructions and have not discussed the case among yourselves. Am I correct? All right, you may call your next witness.
Dr. William Hickerson.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give involving this case is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God? I do. Thank you. Put your right hand over your left.
Good afternoon. Would you state your name for the record?
William Leslie Hickerson, sir.
And Mr. Hickerson, where are you currently employed?
I'm employed at the University of Tennessee, University of Tennessee Health Science Centers, and the Regional 1 Hospital in Memphis.
In what capacity are you with Region 1 Hospital in Memphis?
I'm the medical director of the Burn Center, sir.
And can you describe the benefit of your education and training and experience to be the medical director of the Burn Center in Memphis?
The benefits of my education, I guess, was that it got me to med school to start with.
Yes, sir.
But graduated high school in '71, went to that university in the other state that wears orange rather than the red and the blues in Knoxville, and graduated there in '74. And then '75 to '78 was medical school. '78 to '83 was general surgery training, and then '83 to '85 was plastic surgery training, sir.
And what work experience do you have in dealing with burns?
Every day since 1985, sir.
And based on your experience, have you been qualified as an expert, as a medical specialist in plastic surgery and burns in numerous state and federal courts,
Yes, sir.
including Mississippi?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I would ask that Dr. Hickerson be tendered as an expert at this time as a medical specialist in plastic surgery and burns.
All right, counsel wishes to void the doctor on his qualifications.
No, sir, Your Honor.
All right, the court will recognize Dr. Hickerson as an expert in the field so offered.
Dr. Hickerson, were you actually the director of the burn unit at Region 1 Medical Center, or the MED, on December the 6th of 2014?
Yes, sir.
And were there other, we've already heard from Mary Beth Hall. You know who Mary Beth Hall is?
Yes, sir. She's one of our physician extenders, sir.
And the attending physician on that particular night was who?
That was Dr. Michael Van Vliet. He was a partner of mine.
And did Dr. Van Vliet contact you sometime that night for consultation in regards to a female that was airlifted to Region 1?
Yes, sir, he did.
And did you later determine that person to be an individual by the name of Jessica Chambers?
Yes, sir.
And did you receive updates from Dr. Van Vliet as to her status when she arrived?
Yes, sir.
Did they also send you any photographs of Ms. Chambers?
He did. He sent photographs showing what she was like when she came in, and we discussed the possibility of the survival of a lady with such a burn.
And would you describe for the jury your initial impression of the photographs you received from Ms. Chambers?
The photographs that I received were those that looked like a lady that had somewhere in the neighborhood of a 95% total body surface area burn, and the majority of those were deep dermal to 3rd degree, and the majority of those would all be 3rd degree after any type of fluid resuscitation.
And would you describe for the jury what you mean by 3rd degree?
A 1st degree burn is a sunburn. It's basically that most people have experienced sometime in their life. A 2nd degree burn is one that goes through that outer layer of skin into the 2nd layer of skin. And there's 2 types of those. There's one that's superficial that should heal and do okay. The deeper type of 2nd degree burn is one that usually has to be grafted also, if it's any significant size. A 3rd degree burn goes all the way through the skin, and there's no chance of survival or regeneration of the top layer of the skin in that case.
And you did state the majority of her burns were 3rd degree burns.
Yes, sir.
Now, what was her survival rate when she came to the med?
Essentially none, sir.
There's nothing you could do?
No, sir.
And she did pass away at the med approximately 3 hours after she arrived, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, have you actually spoken with law enforcement officials, been provided other photographs, mainly autopsy photos, from the autopsy of Jessica Chambers?
Yes, sir, I have.
And you've been able to view those photographs?
Yes, sir.
And the jury's already seen some autopsy photos, and certainly I'm going to allow you to further explain them. But I told you when I first met you that I'm certainly no burn specialist, and when I looked at the photographs, there were areas that didn't appear to be that bad of burns. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
And they actually look normal skin color to me.
Yes, sir.
But you described those as burns.
They were the deeper areas of burns, yes, sir.
And describe to the jury what you mean by that, because I got real confused at first, I'll be honest with you.
Well, the picture that you showed me had areas that just to a normal observer taking a quick glance would have been that one wasn't burned because the area next to it was more red. Well, there's 2 things with that. The area that had actually been tanned, much like you would for leather process that you wear with your shoes, tanning your leather, that's what that skin was like. It wasn't going to be pliable. It just had the color that wasn't red, it wasn't black. But that's most of what we see. There's a fallacy that if you have a 3rd degree burn that it's going to turn black. That's only if it chars. It's just going to go ahead, it can peel off, it can be white, it can be dark, but that was a normal 3rd degree burn, sir. The area next to it, that was particularly the areas on the back and the legs and things like that was red, may very well have been 3rd degree at that time also, because sometimes the heat is such that it actually fixes the red cells that are in that skin to where the oxygen is still there. And so it appears to be a 2nd degree burn, which would blanch if you touched it, but a lot of the times you're fooled with that.
Your Honor, may I approach, well actually may I ask the witness to step down and grab some of the exhibits Ms. Palmer can
You may.
check over. I'm going to try to stay out of jury's way. Dr. Hickerson, would you describe what you're talking about in regards to those third-degree burns that I say looked normal when I first looked at them?
These are the areas that are all basically tanned. The areas through here that are white just have that top that have been peeled back and off. These are the areas through here that you see that this white is burned. It just has the epidermis that's come off. You're looking at the dermis underneath. And I'm sorry, my voice is such with my allergies this time of year that I hope that I can be understood. This red down through here is still a very significant burn, and probably in all honesty is a third-degree burn as well. These cuts that you see are cuts that were made by Dr. Van Vliet because she could not. I guess the best way to explain it is if you've ever gone out and had leather shoes on that got wet and they dried, then they became very hard. That they didn't bend with you. You had to break them back. You put saddle soap or anything else on them trying to loosen that leather back up. Well, the human skin's the same way when it burns. It contracts back down. It loses its elasticity. So she couldn't get the necessary air into her lungs because the chest wouldn't expand. If you look and see when you breathe, your lungs, when you take air in, your chest gets bigger. And then when you exhale the air, it goes back down. She couldn't do that because of the leather nature that you have. So we put incisions down through here that go down that chest and across so it lets it expand. And what you see here is not where it's been pulled apart, but where that skin bounces out and back just as soon as it's cut to allow that then to expand.
What is allowing the skin to expand create?
You can get more oxygen into her lungs. That's what we call a tidal volume, okay? When you breathe, a little baby, when we have to resuscitate a baby, we can't put a lot of air through those lungs or they'll pop. So the tidal volume on the child is much less than that on an adult. Because when you breathe that air in, your chest expands and then you get enough oxygen. Okay? Now then, with this situation, although she might have gotten air in, it wouldn't have been enough. It would have probably been less than half of the tidal volume that she normally would, and it would take a lot more pressure to get it in. So even with an endotracheal tube in place, a tube that goes in for the breathing tube that you put in, you can't afford to have to put too much pressure behind it or it damages the lungs. And so therefore, we try to make it the best we can by making these incisions, allowing that to expand so that you can get that air in at that time.
Doctor, you hit on it. How does a burn like this or burns like this affect the amount of oxygen intake for a person?
It'll decrease it dramatically until you do something to relieve that pressure, sir.
Now, when we've already introduced, we've introduced a document that is a run report from MedStat. It's previously been marked as Exhibit 13. And in that run report, of course, this is from the ambulance personnel. They state that breath sounds were clear and equal bilaterally.
Okay?
Now, could that be true?
Sure. It doesn't have anything to do with the amount of air she's getting in.
To a burn this severe, does that statement accurately portray how her body was doing?
No, sir.
And explain why.
Well, for several reasons. Because if you have a small, the normal size of your trachea initially is going to be something that's going to be about this size for an adult, okay? And you can get a lot of air through there. And you look and see them what oxygenation they have based upon pulse oximeters and things like that that read that oxygen. You can take that down to the size of a pencil lead and still read those same things. That doesn't mean, though, that they're actually getting what they need. That's just like saying that you go to dinner and you get 1P. Well, you ate. That would be appropriate to say that you had dinner. But it wouldn't be the dinner I'd want, because I'd want a lot more. And oxygen is going to be the same way.
Dr. Hickerson, I'm going to also prop up what's been previously marked as Exhibit 27, which is a
Excuse me.
photograph from the autopsy of Jessica Chambers of her face. Can you describe for me the physical challenges that Jessica Chambers would be going through in these pictures?
Yes, sir. Basically, what she has is a third-degree burn to that entire face. These whiter areas are still third-degree. You have an area on her tongue that, besides the lips that are burned, and you can see where almost now the mouth itself is taking a different configuration. Normally, we have our mouth that comes out, and we have our commissures, these corners, okay? They're not rounded. Now then, when something is burnt, you lose the elasticity that we've talked about, and the collagen is denatured, going back to a protein phase, which means that nothing wants to work the same way. And it takes the smallest configuration it can get then. And so you've gone from having, your pupils are out here, and that's normally where that corner of that mouth is, okay? And what you see here is that it's rounded now, the lips are starting to even turn, and so it's not going to function as well, even if she's trying to get more oxygen in. In addition, this tongue, you have soot here, but you also have a different configuration of that tongue. To me, it almost looks like a down child's tongue. And I don't know if you're familiar with how those look. They're short and they're fat, okay? They don't move right. Well, hers is not because of a congenital aspect, but because it's burnt. And you see through here, totally different than back over here. But that looks like that she's had an injury to her tongue as well as having soot from what all the byproducts of combustion that has been where she's been burned.
Dr. Hickerson, you have reviewed the medical records, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You've reviewed the autopsy report,
Yes, sir.
and starting with this picture, were there some areas of her body that were spared from burns?
Yes, sir. The areas that were spared were going to be the perineal regions, which is the front, the genitalia underneath, and the buttocks, and also the bottoms of her feet.
Dr. Hickerson, I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 25. These are other photographs from the autopsy from a different angle of Jessica Chambers. Can you describe any sparing that you see in these particular photographs?
This area is spared here. This area is spared here. Okay, the buttocks.
And the spared areas that you've seen, what does that indicate to you?
To me, it indicates that she was probably in a sitting position when she was burned, and either she had on shoes that had soles on them, or they're on the floor of something, and she is sitting. That would cause that type of sparing.
Let me ask you, I think the old saying I've heard is injuries equal temperature multiplied by time. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. So the hotter the temperature and the longer the exposure, the deeper the burns.
These particular burns on Jessica Chambers, would you consider those quick burns?
No, sir.
And describe what you mean by
Well,
that.
I think that in looking at this, and I've been doing this for over 32 years now,
Yes, sir.
that this is one of the worst cases that you'll see. And these areas are deep, they're not quick. And the temperature that you would generate are such that it's going to be a high temperature and a longer exposure to get that type of injury.
Would these injuries be consistent with sitting in a car or an enclosed space?
Yes, sir, particularly in view of the fact that she had the soot and all that were in her airways.
And describe what you mean by the soot in her airways.
From the autopsy pictures, she has the larynx that was there, the endotracheal, not endotracheal, the trachea itself, the airway, her airway, had soot that was down that airway. And so with that, that is an indication that she breathed in the products of combustion, which usually indicates that in 99% of the cases that is an enclosed space in which that fire occurred.
I'm going to show you a photograph previously marked as Exhibit 28. Is that in fact the photograph that you're referring to?
Yes, sir, it is.
And would you show the jury what you referred
We're talking
to?
about these carbon products here, okay?
Now, in this case, we've already referred to the chemical gasoline. And if she were set on fire with gasoline inside that car, what would you expect to find? Excuse me. What type of...
I'd expect it to be a hot burn.
Okay. And what, inside a vehicle, what type of things would you expect her to be breathing in?
Okay. All the products in that car are either going to melt and give off chemicals, or they're going to be on fire and giving off carbon. That's the smoke and things like that that you'll see. And that's why you see these type of particles down there. The chemicals themselves, you're not going to measure in that type of, just by looking.
We had one of the first responders refer to her as a zombie. And when he referred to how she was walking, would that be consistent with the injuries that you found?
Yes, sir. Remember, we talked about the fact that that skin is now like leather. And so you can't move it like you normally would. And the face itself, I think that when you look at that, the facial expressions are gone. She's not able to make any facial expressions because that skin is tight. In addition, you've got the tongue that's there that has been injured. So all of that comes into play, particularly along with the swelling that she could have in her mouth as well.
And we've talked about shock. Can you describe shock and levels of shock for the jury?
Well, I think shock, you've got two different types of shock to me, okay, just from a lay standpoint. The first is a physiological aspect, meaning that you don't get enough oxygen to your cells for the cells to stay alive. And the other type of shock would be a psychological shock that you would go through.
Now, would it be typical for a person with this degree of burns and this percentage of burns to go through shock?
I think that the initial aspect that they're going to have is going to be a psychological aspect as much as anything. And they go through phases of those that can live, go through several phases of that psychological reaction. Number one is, I'm going to die. That in itself would carry a lot. Number two, and this goes not only with burns this size, but smaller burns, okay? The next one comes in is, will I live? And then you have different sections that go from that. Will I live with all my body parts? Will I live being able to function? Things along those lines. But from this standpoint, initially, it's, I'm going to die.
Again, you testified she had no survival rate at the bed.
With her thought process of that, if she did, she was correct.
You've been a burn doctor a long time.
Careful, you're telling my age, sir. Young guys.
And you've worked a lot of cases with burn victims.
Yes, sir.
Now, many of those burn victims, I'm going to assume, were brought in by first responders.
Yes, sir.
And the particular injuries to Jessica Chambers, is that a common scene for first responders based on your experience?
Not like that, no, sir.
Why do you say that?
Most of the burns that they're going to see are going to be smaller burns, okay? The majority of them won't work a major house fire. But even in a major house fire, they may just have inhalation injuries and some small burns. This is not a common burn that you see. This is not a common burn that we would see in a burn center.
Now, we've had several law enforcement officers, first responders that have testified as to aspects of her speech. Does she have injuries that could severely affect her speech?
Yes, sir. May I go back?
Yes, sir. I want to start with the photograph of her face, if I may. And doctor, starting with her lips and her mouth, would you describe to the jury aspects here that could severely affect her speech?
Sure. When we speak, one of the main things that we do is we move our mouth. We change the position of our lips, we change the position of our tongue, whether it goes up, whether it goes out, whatever we do with that, or how it goes back up to the roof in the back to be able to speak. This isn't going to move. This is going to be more like the Down's child that I talked about, but that can't move. And when you combine everything, particularly with the swelling, it's almost like my voice now, okay? With colds or allergies, we get a lot of swelling back there in the back of the throat. That big thing that hangs down, the uvula gets longer. You know, you just can't make things sound like you normally would. If you're a singer, try going to the choir and hitting those notes that you normally would. It just doesn't happen. And that's why a lot of singers use a lot of steroids to keep that edema down. In this case, you've got the lips that don't move, the tongue that's not going to work right. It's thicker, it's in the back. You cannot enunciate any of those words that you would want to say. It just doesn't come out right.
In regards to her airway itself, there was testimony from Dr. Barnhart that her airway was generally more red than it should be, and she actually referred to those as heat injuries. Is that the type of injury you would expect in a case like this?
I would describe those as being more chemical injuries, sir. Heat is a little more difficult below our airways, but can occur. And not having done the autopsy and not having seen the specimen, if it were truly heat, then this was, an extremely hot temperature.
And the chemicals you're referring to are those byproducts of combustion inside that car?
Yes, sir.
Now, explain to the jury what edema or edema to the throat would be.
That's just the swelling. It's the swelling that occurs because of those chemicals, because of the steam that's there, that you're going to have. It's the body's reaction to that type of injury.
And could edema or swelling to the throat cause difficulty with speech?
Without a doubt.
Finally, you mentioned the chest being tight, and certainly we see the cuts and how the pressure had to be released, was the easiest way I could put it. But the chest being tight itself on the scene as was described, could that affect her speech?
Yes, sir, because what you have to do to be able to speak is get air out of your lungs. If you have less air going in, you're not going to have as much getting out. If you're going to yell at somebody, what do? Take a deep breath, and then you shout at your kid to get back in here. Okay? Likewise, when you're going to talk and you're excited, you're trying to do that, that's not going to come out right, because she just does not have the amount of air to be able to get that accomplished.
So given the injuries that you described in detail for this jury to her lips and her mouth, also to her tongue, with possible edema and the tightness of the chest, is it likely that she would have severe difficulties in her speech?
Yes, sir, without a doubt.
Your Honor, I tender the witness.
All right.
Your Honor, I'll take
Doctor,
this
you
board
may-
down. If Ms. Palmer needs to use it, she can put it back on.
All right. Doctor, you may return to the witness stand, please. All right, Ms. Darla, you may begin your cross-examination when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Dr. Hickerson.
Aye, ma'am.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
That passes.
Yes, ma'am.
I hand you a report that at the end of it, it just pretty much indicates the time that Miss Jessica was admitted to the burn center. I thought you might not know that from memory. So if you would go to page, looks like it's page 7.
I'm sorry, I don't see page numbers.
May I approach you?
You may.
Sorry, I was thinking this way.
All right.
For purposes of your recollection, did you see the admit time to the burn center?
I assume that you're talking about the fact that there's a 2155 or 2156 turnover,
Yes, sir.
okay?
And if the time, I'm sure you're not aware of the time that firefighters and other first responders were on the scene to assist the patient. If I were to say that time was about 8 o'clock or 8:10 or so, would you agree that at least 2 hours or so would have passed from the time that she made it to the burn center?
Okay.
And further, would you agree that her condition would be different than when first responders found her to the point that she did get to the burn center?
Certain parts of the exam would be.
Yes. And for the most part, her condition would have worsened from when she was initially found to when she got to the burn center.
It depends upon what we're really discussing, what parts. That's a very general statement for me as a physician.
Yes, sir. With regard to her her throat, her larynx, the burns themselves, surely she incurred a worsening of her injuries in a period of 2 hours.
To a certain extent, yes, ma'am. But she did not have a lot of fluid given during that time frame. And they couldn't get IVs. They had IOs, interosseous, that were there. And so if you were to look at the amount of fluids that she would normally get versus probably what she had, that would be somewhat worse, but not what you would expect over the first 2 to 3 hours with a full resuscitative effort that would have been given.
So you can't speak to directly what the condition of her larynx would have been 2 hours prior to that?
Not
Does that make
necessarily
sense?
to her larynx, but the skin itself and the inability to move,
Yes.
and the fact that her tidal volumes would be down, the fact that that mouth didn't get any tighter over those 2 hours, that would not change. And with the appearance of that tongue, the thermal injury to that tongue, the way it looked, that would still be there. It might have gotten worse, but that still would have been there.
Yes, sir. And that's my question, basically. Just with regard to the tongue, if there's a time frame of 2 hours passage, I would imagine that there was a worsening, or she was in a worse condition than she was in 2 hours before that.
Okay.
Is that a yes?
That's a yes, but it's a yes that states I still think that what I stated on the front end in regards to her airway and her speech would still be paramount and give her problems with any type of communication.
Correct. She could still speak, though. You agree with that?
She could probably still speak,
Yes.
just like she could walk.
Correct. And also, if there were at least 10 to 12 other individuals who were speaking to her, that would indicate that she could speak, correct?
She could probably speak, but not enunciate well.
Okay. However, if there were 10 to 12 individuals who heard her say certain things, you would agree that that's probably what she said.
Possibly. But I think during those time frames, it's very difficult to understand some of the things these people say. Because we have these type of patients that come in just immediately, not 2 or 3 hours down the road. And it's very hard to understand what they say.
Doctor, you would agree that every patient is different, correct, with regard to a burn patient?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I believe your testimony was that psychologically they go through a process. I believe the first thing you said was, I'm going to die, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Wouldn't you also think that a person would want to convey who did this to them if they're in that process of thinking, I'm going to die?
That could be possible.
Yes. Further, I think you said, will I live? All of those things would be going on in a person's mind or a patient's mind who's been burned, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So the process of wanting to convey information that's important would be vital in that person's mind, psychologically.
Could be. Each person's individual.
Yes. And so to suffer burns like this does not prevent the person from speaking. You do agree with that?
I would say from trying to speak, okay?
Yes.
Because she still can get some air out. And I think they may try to communicate. That would be the best way I could put it.
However, if you were not on the scene with these individuals, you cannot say with 100% certainty that statements that she made were not made.
I wasn't there.
Yes, sir. Course indulgence.
Yes, ma'am.
I attend the witness. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Redirect? Would you like some water?
If you've got somebody.
We got plenty. He's gonna get you something right now.
This old throat feels like it's a... Sir? This old throat feels like it's a bad...
Doctor, you step down one more time. I'm going to show you an exhibit that's been marked Exhibit 5 previously. This is a picture of the same girl on the scene on December 6, 2017. Some of the injuries you've already described, are they depicted in this photograph?
Yes, sir.
And you already testified the tightness would not change. And the thermal injury to her tongue and mouth area, would that be immediate injury?
Yes, sir.
And would that be injury she would have sustained while in that vehicle?
While on fire, yes, sir.
And how would you describe what her body went through in that vehicle?
You know, that's really tough to even imagine, okay? When I was in the 7th grade, I had a 20% burn. Okay, my shirt caught on fire. And I can tell you that that immediate pain was such that there wasn't anything like it. Hadn't seen anything like it since. And I've had a colon rupture, I've had broken bones and things like that, nothing's compared. And I hope the type of injuries that she sustained, it was not immediate, so she was in that situation on fire for a while. The exact time I can't tell you, but long enough that that would have been very significant going through.
And all the injuries you described and the multitude of injuries you described that would have affected her speech, would those injuries have been depicted here to be immediate?
Yes, sir. You see the same thing occurring with the lips here, same thing that you see on the inside. So that would have been immediate. Gotten worse with time, and that's why she'd have to be intubated. But even they had problems in the air, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm remembering, the air crew tried to intubate her, meaning take a tube and put into her trachea to breathe for her. And they were unable to do so. They tried that twice, if I'm not mistaken. And then they went to their King airway, which is a different type of airway that basically seals everything but doesn't go down into the trachea itself, so they could get the air.
And ultimately she wasn't intubated until she arrived at the med, is that correct?
That is correct. They weren't able to.
The run report that we referred to previously when Ms. Palmer was asking about her speech ability says, patient attempted to answer questions, unable to understand some of answers due to probable burns to her vocal cords. Would you agree with that, or do you have a way of?
Well, to the vocal cords itself, I doubt that was the situation. But to everything else that she had, given her the problems to be able to talk, without a doubt.
And that's the lips, the tongue, the air, and the
lips, the tongue, the airway itself, the back of the throat, and then the fact that she's got a smaller amount of air that she's exchanging.
Okay, doctor. You might have a seat back on the witness stand. Your Honor, I have no further questions from Dr. Hickerson. I would ask he be finally released.
Doctor, you may be finally released.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. You may call your next witness.
State calls Barry Thompson or recalls Barry Thompson.
All right. Yes. All right, we'll let the record show this is Mr. Thompson had been previously sworn, testified on direct examination yesterday, and testified in the field today. When we visited the scene, he's been previously sworn, as I stated, so you may resume direct examination, which then we will allow complete cross-examination.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
And do me a favor, everybody's heard from you once, please state your name for the record.
Barry Thompson,
Investigator Thompson, again, where are you currently employed, in what capacity?
Major over the Investigative Division of Panola County Sheriff's Office.
And do you also have another job title with the Panola County Sheriff's Department?
I do.
And what is that job title?
I'm the head of courtroom security for all the circuit and chancery court.
So you are in charge of the courtroom when we're in court, is that right?
Yes,
And I've already asked you jurisdiction and venue for Heron Road, but when your officers responded to the call at Heron Road on December 6, 2017, were you in town?
no, sir.
December 2014.
No, sir.
Were you in town?
No, sir.
And did you get in contact with your investigators that was on call?
I did.
And who was that investigator?
Lieutenant Dixon?
And did Lieutenant Edward Dixon go out to the scene?
Yes.
And he has already testified here in this particular trial. Did you arrive back in town that weekend in Batesville?
Sunday afternoon, yes, sir.
And when you arrived back in Sunday, did you pick up with this investigation on Monday along with numerous other agencies?
Yes.
And describe for the jury, this is not your normal occurrence, is that right?
No, sir.
And I'll venture to guess y'all haven't had many things like this.
Because of the publicity of this actual case, no, it was very nationally publicized, and it was high profile, to say the least.
Well, and going on that, did you have numerous local and federal agencies that were offering assistance to help?
Yes.
And did you actually accept some of the numerous local and federal agencies' help?
We accepted all outside help that we could get from any agency that wanted to provide help to us.
And I'm gonna back up. You were given notice that Jessica Chambers died on the early morning hours of December 7th.
Yes.
And when you began working with all these other state and federal investigators, did y'all start with a phone that was found at the scene?
Yes.
During the investigation, were y'all able to determine whose phone that was?
Yes.
And whose phone was it?
Jessica Chambers.
And were y'all able to get a list of numbers called on that phone?
Yes, sir. We had somewhat of a war room, command room, however you want to call it, set up at our office in our conference room, and there were numerous guys from various agencies, be it ATF, U.S. Department of Justice, U.S. Marshals, and other local agencies that all they did all day was dump phone records, dump cell phone towers, and collect data out of that phone and cell phone tower.
And were you able to retrieve the records from Ms. Chambers?
We were.
Now, it's got to be asked, there was one name that resonated above all others early on in this investigation, is that right?
Yes.
Did you ask Daniel Cole to have these firefighters prepare some statements for you immediately?
I did.
And what name did you start with?
It was Eric or Derek was the common names that kept coming out from the statements of the firefighters.
And when you started your investigation, were y'all centered on an Eric or Derek?
Yes.
But also investigating anybody and everybody that had contact?
Absolutely.
Now, during the course of the investigation, and I know yours is limited, we'll get to that, are you aware that there have been many Erics and Dereks that were contacted and looked into?
Yes, sir. I don't know an exact number. More than 15, I know, but I don't know an exact number.
And we were using resources from your sheriff's department,
Yes.
mainly the FBI.
Yes.
How about MBI?
Yes.
And explain to the jury who MBI is.
MBI is the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations. It is the investigative arm of the Mississippi Highway Patrol.
And ATF.
Yes.
And also we were offered a valuable resource from the United States Attorney's Office.
Yes.
And all of these individuals participated in investigating any possible Erics or Dereks.
Yes, sir. Along with the U.S. Marshal Service. They were also there.
Sure, don't leave them out.
Yes.
During the course of the investigation, did any Eric or Derek develop into a viable suspect in this case?
No, sir.
And When officers started looking through Jessica's phone records, did they locate the individuals he had been in contact with?
They did.
And describe for the jury what a contact interview is.
A contact interview, in the way we handle them for us, a contact interview is simply an information gathering interview. It's similar to a witness interview as far as gathering information. The only difference I would say is most of these contact interviews, Miranda rights will be involved, because just to protect their rights in case they become a viable suspect at a later time, we always will advise them of their rights. But generally it's an informal interview that's not recorded. It's we take notes as we take these interviews, and it's basically just to lay out a timeline where the person tells me they were, because we knew they had recent contact with somebody.
And were you able to find out that Quentin Tellis, among other people, had some contact with Jessica Chambers?
Yes.
Even to the day of her murder?
Yes.
And did you, along with investigator Tim Douglas with MBI, conduct a contact interview with Quentin Tellis 6 days after the murder, being December 10th, 2014?
Yes, sir. It would have been on December the 10th, I believe, around 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the afternoon, around 1500, 30 hours maybe.
May I approach you?
You may.
Investigator Thompson, I'm going to show you a document. Can you describe and identify that document for me?
Yes, sir. This is a form document that we use at our investigative division. It's titled Criminal Investigation Bureau Interrogation Advice of Rights. It's typically what you would call a Miranda rights form.
And everybody's heard of your Miranda rights. Did you, in fact, read Quentin Tellis his rights?
I believe Agent Douglas, we were together. Agent Douglas, I believe, because he is signed on here as being the person that read them, and I witnessed them, we would have all been together, the three of us, while they were read, and initialed at each right, and then, of course, signed by Mr. Tellis, Mr. Douglas, and myself.
Now, we're going to have some later rights forms that actually are going to be introduced, so would you go ahead and describe for the jury this one time what the rights are that you read to each contact interview, including Quentin Tellis?
Well, first of all, you gather their pertinent information, being their personal information. That's name, address, social security number, date of birth, highest level of education that they've completed. Generally, most of us will ask them if they can read and write. If they cannot, we make sure that we are able to read it for them where they understand it. After that, you advise them of their rights, and those rights are, before we ask you any questions, you must understand your rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to talk to a lawyer before questioning. We have a right to talk to a lawyer for advice before we ask you any questions. Have a lawyer with you during questioning if you wish. If you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed for you before any questioning if you wish. If you decide to answer questions now without a lawyer present, you'll still have the right to stop answering at any time. You also have the right to stop answering at any time until you talk to a lawyer. Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
And now, once you advise him of his rights, does he actually initial each one of those rights?
Yes, he does. Each right that you read him, he will have a chance to initial it, saying that he understood that individual right.
And then, is there a waiver of those rights if he chooses to speak to you?
There he is.
And would you read that waiver for the jury?
Yes, sir. It says, I have read this statement of my rights and understand what my rights are. I'm willing to make a statement and answer questions. I do not want a lawyer at this time. I understand and know what I am doing. No promises or threats have been made to me, and no pressure or coercion have been used against me.
Is that in fact signed by Quentin Tellis?
Yes, sir.
And is also signed by Investigator Douglas and yourself?
Yes, sir.
And time?
15:36 hours, which would be 3:36 in the afternoon.
Is this in fact the rights waiver that Quentin Tellis signed before he spoke to you on December 10th, 2014?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I would introduce this as an exhibit to this witness's testimony.
Any objection?
Well, let me review that document.
All right, sir.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, be so marked and admitted.
Now, you described this contact interview as a fact-finding mission, correct?
Yes, it's just an information gathering interview.
And I assume part of that information will be how he knows Jessica.
Yes,
And I assume part of that information will be where he was on the day of December the 6th, 2014.
yes.
Did Quentin tell you how he met Keisha? I'm sorry, did Quentin tell you how he met Jessica?
Yes.
Would you tell the jury how he met Jessica, just in his own words?
Jessica had a friend by the name of Keisha Meyer. He met Jessica through Keisha Meyer. I believe he told us he got Jessica's number from Keisha Meyer, and they began to talk and text, and eventually the three of them would hang out.
And did you state how they communicated?
Usually it was by text or telephone.
And what would they do when they hung out most of the time?
Smoke dope.
Well, I believe he described it a little differently. They would be in a car, correct?
Yeah, they'd ride around and smoke dope. I mean,
Cut blocks is the word they used?
yeah.
Now, did you or Investigator Douglas ask him if he had ever been intimate or had sex with Jessica Chambers?
The question was initially posed to him if they had an intimate relationship. That question was initially answered in the negative, but then followed up by Mr. Tellis. He said they had sex one time.
Okay. And moving on to the day of December 6, 2014, did you attempt to determine where Mr. Tellis, where he was located during the crime?
At the time of the crime, yes.
And where did he tell you he was, and who was he with during the time of this crime?
At the time of the crime, he stated that he was in a location east of Cortland that is referred to as the Sandbox area. It is a location east of Cortland where we were today. It would have been east of Highway 51, somewhat south of the store from where we were, probably 4 or 5 miles southeast. And it's at the corner of McNeely and Hence Road. It's termed the Sandbox area of our county.
And again, who was he with?
He stated he was with Michael Sanford and Taryn Shegog, who also go by the nicknames of Big Mike and Tootie.
And ultimately, was that the extent of your contact interview, just attempting to gain some information in his location?
Yes.
And then you continue on in the investigation, or y'all continue on the investigation?
Yes.
Now, we've already stated, and the name Eric and Derek was out there, correct?
Yes.
And was it already out in the media at December 10th, 2014?
I'm sure that it was. I mean, it was highly publicized. I don't watch a whole lot of news, but I'm sure that it was out, yes.
So people would have known it.
Yes.
And did he in fact tempt you? Did he in fact give you a name of somebody
He
that
did.
he thought might have done it?
He did.
And what did he tell you about an Eric or Derek?
He told me that he believed that Derek Holmes had been stalking Jessica.
Based on that information, and of course the information you were looking into that name period, did you or other investigators look into Derek Holmes?
We did.
And was Derek Holmes ever developed as a suspect in this matter?
Not as a viable suspect in this matter, no.
Now, in all of at this point, we're early in the investigation, correct?
Yes.
In all of your contact interviews, just in case, what do you do? Do you ask him to provide something?
We did. Well, everybody that was involved in this case, we asked them for a voluntary DNA sample. You know, if there was any evidence that possibly had DNA on it, to clear them or to be tested against that evidence, we asked for a voluntary DNA sample.
And of course, at December 10th, we already had the keys, correct?
Yes.
But we didn't have any DNA profiles back, correct?
No, sir.
Detective Thompson, I'm going to hand you a document. Can you describe and identify that document for me?
Yes. It is a form, DNA consent form. It has the date, the time, and the location that you're attempting to get consent to collect a DNA sample. It has a place for the suspect's name. It has a waiver, then a place for the suspect, or be it whoever you're interviewing is giving the sample, to sign. It has a place for the signature of the person taking the samples, and a place for a witness to sign.
And is that form in fact signed with the signature of Quentin Vitalis?
Yes,
And who in fact is the witness in this particular matter?
Lieutenant Edward Dixon.
And ultimately, who signed as the one taking the sample?
I did.
Your Honor, I would offer this document as an exhibit to this witness's testimony.
Any objection, counsel?
None, Your Honor.
All right, be so marked and admitted.
I handed you a package that is labeled at the top, Scales Biolab. What is that package?
This is a prefab package that we get from Scales Biolab, which is a biological laboratory that tests various types of DNA in Brandon, Mississippi. It comes with an envelope to be shipped or delivered to their office. It comes with two sets of cotton tip swabs that are sterile inside, and it's got places for all the agency taking it, the case number, the name of the person you're taking the sample from, their age, race, and sex, the date and time of collection, who collected it, and where it was collected.
And is that a package previously provided to you by Scales?
Yes.
And when you were provided their packaging, were you in fact trained or told by them how they would want you to collect a sample?
Yes, sir. I've been using Scales Biolab for many years, and they do provide us with these, and anybody that is going to use their lab, they show you the proper procedure for collecting mouse swabs.
And did Bo Scales himself actually show you how to collect it for them?
Yes.
And did you use those collection techniques for this particular package?
Yes.
And what is the date of the collection on this particular package?
December the 10th, 2014 at 16:10 hours, which is 4:10 p.m.
And this contains the DNA sample from whom?
Quentin Tellis.
Was that based on the consent previously received?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would offer this sample as presented to this witness's testimony.
Any objection, counsel?
None, Your Honor.
All right, it'll be marked and admitted. 31.
Investigator Thompson, you testified that Quentin Tellis admitted to being with Jessica the morning of December 6, 2014.
Yes, sir. He did tell us that they had, himself, Keisha, and Jessica had ridden around earlier that morning.
After the noon hour, did he tell you that he had been with her at all the rest of that day?
No,
In fact, did he tell you he had not?
he did.
And he actually told you who he was with during the time of the fire?
That's correct. He said he was with Big Mike and Tootie, which are Michael Sanford and Terrence Chico.
Now, this happened in early December. I don't want this jury to be, I want them to be knowledgeable regarding your involvement. Early December is an off time for the court system, is that correct?
Yes.
And we start back pretty heavy in January.
Usually the first week after New Year's, we're wide open, yes.
And starting in January, did you remain in the court system doing your job with me?
Yes, sir. I had to come back to the courtroom.
So did you turn this investigation and any subsequent interviews or data analysis over to other investigators?
Yes.
Your Honor, 10 of the witnesses.
Cross.
Your Honor, can I move the podium a little bit forward?
Yes, sir. Watch your cord down there. I don't want you to run out of rope and hang yourself, okay? I think you can. If you- There you go, that's good.
I'd like to slide it up a little bit, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
It was not because I was not want to be next to the prosecution. I should have reported that.
Understood.
Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Peterson.
We have talked, and we've met on several occasions.
Yes.
You agree with that?
Yes.
I want to talk to you briefly about some of the testimony that you've rendered and to the questions of the district attorney.
Yes.
Now, you actually were not present in Cortland or in Batesville on December 6, 2014.
No.
Okay? And you actually got involved with this investigation the next day?
I know we met Sunday afternoon, but we actually had got everybody together and met that Monday morning.
Okay.
That's when the state and federal guys started coming in and what I call the war room was set up.
Certainly. So that would have been December 8th?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the following month. Now, December 6th would have been on a Saturday, correct?
Yes.
And then Sunday would have been the 7th, Monday the 8th, and that's when you actually started your investigation.
Yes, sir. As far as being present live, yes.
Certainly. Now, who was it from your agency, if this is applicable, directed the first responders to get their statements together?
Mr. Peterson, it was probably me because during that night of the 6th when this information was coming in, I was constantly on the phone with somebody that was actually on the scene.
Certainly.
Be it whether it was Lieutenant Dixon or Director Cole, one or the other, as they were giving me information about the information they were receiving, I told them to make sure they write good reports about what they remember.
Certainly. So, just to give the jury some indication, you report directly to the sheriff?
We have a chief deputy between us. There is, it's 1, 2, and 3. I'm 3.
You're 3. Okay.
Yes.
Now, what were your job responsibilities back in December 2014?
They were the same as now. I'm major over the investigative division and head of courtroom security.
Now, when you say the investigative division, tell me a little bit about what that means.
Well, at our sheriff's office, I'm not exactly sure how many investigators we had in 2014, but it would have been myself, and Lieutenant Dixon would have been the next in the chain of command under me, and then I believe Jimmy Shannon, Brian Arnold, and maybe one more would have been, they would have reported directly to Lieutenant Dixon, and if a problem over that, Dixon would have brought it to me. Certainly.
So you were basically still in control of everything, even though you were doing it for the first couple of days by phone?
Yes, sir. I mean, I'm not going to say I was in control of it because I wasn't physically there to be in control of it, but it was being run through me by telephone.
Certainly, and I didn't mean that as to try and trip you up. I mean,
Yeah, I
you were
understand.
basically aware of everything that was happening.
For the most part, somebody was calling me, whether it was Lieutenant Dixon, Investigator Shannon, the sheriff. I was constantly talking to somebody.
Okay. Now, but the admonition to get the statements from the first responders, that would have come from someone at the Panola County Sheriff's Department, correct?
Yeah, I mean.
Well, let me ask you like this. There's a lot of agencies involved in this process. We know
Yes.
the FBI, ATF. There wouldn't have been anyone from the ATF or the FBI back on December the 8th communicating with the first responders about getting their statements together.
No, sir.
Or MBI.
I'm going to say, I believe Investigator Special Agent Farish with MBI probably responded either that night or the next day maybe, but I don't think he would have been directly involved with the first responders on that day. Whether it was me or Lieutenant Dixon, somebody told Daniel Cole to have he is over the firemen, so to speak, as far as EMA goes. He would have been the one to get them together and have them write statements.
Certainly. And so when these statements would have been, completed, will they have been turned over to the sheriff's department?
I believe, yes, sir, they were definitely turned over to the sheriff's office. I believe, like I said, EMA Director Cole would have probably gotten all those statements together and brought them to the sheriff's office to be part of this case file.
Okay. Now, did you actually, did part of your investigation entail, or you or someone under your command, did part of your investigation entail them going out to actually interview these first responders after their statements were given?
The first responders were interviewed again, Mr. Peterson. It wasn't by me. It was either agents of the FBI, state or federal agencies that were working with us broke up and did various interviews. As far as telling you the person that physically did the interview, I can't tell you that, but it was, yes, they were re-interviewed.
Certainly, but you're aware that these first responders were interviewed at some point after they completed their statement?
Yes, sir. I believe it was the FBI that did most of those, but I can't be 100% certain.
Now, let me, you indicated that when you spoke with Mr. Tellis on December the 10th during this first interview,
Yes, sir.
you indicated that by that time, which would have been, I guess by that would have been the Wednesday following.
Yes,
That's the date of the interview, correct?
Yes.
Now, you indicated that by that time, the name Eric or Derek was highly publicized in the media.
I think my answer, Mr. Peterson, truthfully was, it probably was, because this was a highly publicized case. I said, but I don't watch a whole lot of news, especially when I'm working something like this.
So let me ask you this. Are you aware, as you sit here today, of any media outlet that would have publicized that particular information?
Like I said, me personally, I'm sure that it was out there.
Okay.
If you want me to name a news channel, I can't do that.
Well, no, what I'm asking is, you say you're sure it was out there. I'm just trying to ascertain your source, since it's a point that you seem fairly clear on.
Well, Mr. Peterson, this case was highly publicized, and you had media outlets running around down here interviewing anybody they could, be it a first responder, anybody that would talk to them, they would talk to them.
Okay.
And I know some of these first responders were interviewed back then.
Okay.
Now, I'm not going to tell you I'm 100% positive they told them that or that it was aired. But I do want to say that it was highly publicized.
Certainly. Well, now, so was there any other name that you're aware of that was highly publicized during that time? Was Quentin Tellis' name highly publicized?
No.
So even the media in this case, the names that they put out was Eric or Derek.
In the initial interviews, you know, a lot of these volunteer firemen, that's what they heard, and people were, the name was out there, yes.
Right, but it was Eric or Derek that was out there, right? It wasn't Quentin, was it?
No,
Okay. It wasn't Tellis either, was it?
no.
Okay. Now, so you continue your investigation, and we were talking about that hierarchy. I believe there's one, you're three.
Yes.
Okay, who would be number four?
At that time, Major Albert Perkins would have been Panola 4. He's now retired. But he was the major over patrol.
Okay.
I was the major over investigations. He was the major over uniform patrol.
And Mr. Dixon fell under your hierarchy, correct? So
Yes.
he reported to you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about the actual crime scene. Are you aware of Cole Haley? He referred during his testimony to a search and rescue mission. Do you know what he's talking about in that regard?
I think we touched on this on the scene. I know that we have a county search and rescue team that is comprised of some of the volunteer firefighters as well as deputies and other volunteers that is headed by EMA Director Cole. I know that there was I think maybe the FBI and some of my guys took a search and rescue team out there to just walk that area like me and you talked about this morning.
Yes.
To both sides of the road, just looking for anything that stood out, any type of evidence that could have been left.
Okay. So that team would have consisted of members of the the sheriff's department and some other agencies in this area?
Possibly, yes, sir, but like I told you earlier today, no matter whether it was our agency or a federal agency, some type of criminal investigator would have been there with them. If they saw something in question, they would have been told, one, don't touch it, you get an investigator to come look at it, and if need be, bag it.
Certainly. Now, do you know the exact date that this would have taken place?
Mr. Peterson, I'm not even gonna guess, I'm not sure.
Sure.
It was shortly afterwards, but, I mean, it would have been that following week.
That following week?
Yes, sir, but I don't know what day, Mr.
So it
Peterson.
would have happened during the week following the crime?
Yes.
And when we say the following, we're talking about by the next Saturday?
That would be my honest opinion, but as far as giving you a fact on that, like I said, it was so many of us going so many different directions, and I kind of was put along with a couple of more. We delegated the work out to groups of people.
Yes.
There would have been a lead investigator on each team that went to do something that day.
Okay.
But I would have, in my opinion to you, yes, it would have happened very soon after the crime. We wouldn't have waited weeks or months to go look for evidence to a crime that happened on the scene.
Fair enough. Now, there was evidence collected at the scene, and this evidence would have been the evidence that was collected within this perimeter that was set up where the yellow tape would have been strung out, for a lack of a better word.
As I said, that would be an honest opinion to you because I wasn't physically there, but by knowing the case, I would have said the immediate area around the car would have been processed immediately for any possible evidence.
Now, are you aware of any inventory that would have come from that collection of evidence?
Yes, sir. There was an evidence list that would have been made. I'm sure there's an evidence list in this file.
Sure.
Lieutenant Dixon, typically we work in pairs, either with another investigator or a uniformed patrol deputy. The investigator should be doing the collection, and somebody should be standing beside them, keeping a running list with a number of the items that are collected.
Right. So in that case, this would have been affected by Lieutenant Dixon, correct?
Yes.
And it would have been customary for him to put together an inventory of the items that he found.
Probably on a scene like this, when you had burnt stuff, you had wet evidence possibly, typically I would say Lieutenant Dixon would have probably grabbed somebody and had him standing beside him as he picked up evidence and bagged it, making his list for him.
Right.
Because he's going to have on gloves to protect evidence.
Right. And I understand that, there's going to be, a certain protocol for collecting this evidence. I'm not trying to get into that.
Yes.
What I'm asking you is that if there was evidence collected, there would be some record of it with the person or made by the person who collected it.
If protocol was followed properly, yes.
Okay. Are you aware of that protocol being followed in this case, or let me ask you this, are you aware of any deviations in that protocol?
To my knowledge, no, sir. I know there was a handwritten evidence list as part of this file.
Certainly. Now, that would have been from the evidence that would have been collected by Lieutenant Dixon.
Yeah.
Was there a similar list that may have been generated by this search and rescue team if they found some evidence?
If they found evidence, I mean, whatever investigator was leading that search and rescue team would have to physically answer that question. Should there have been a list? Yes.
Certainly. Do you recall, as you sit here today, seeing any evidence that would have been produced by this search and rescue team?
No.
Okay. But you do recall the list that would have been produced by Mr. Dixon?
I do.
Okay. Now, when you interviewed Mr. Tellis on December the 10th, who else was present?
Investigator, Special Agent Tim Douglas, Mississippi Bureau of Investigation.
Just the two of you?
Yes.
Okay. And where did this interview take place?
In my office at the Panola County Sheriff's Office.
Explain to me, how did you come to be interviewing Quentin Tellis?
The group of investigators that were working on phone records got out of the dump of her phone, there were some text messages between him and her, and it was obvious that contact had been made, recent contact had been made, whether his number showed up or whether it was a text message sent from his number. And we, like I said, we were just simply doing contact interviews with everybody she talked to recently.
Certainly.
That's how he became on the initial contact interview.
Okay, so you went, picked him up.
I wouldn't have went and picked him up.
Someone went and picked him up.
Somebody from whatever agency would have picked him up. Myself and Investigator Douglas, along with others, would have been stationary doing interviews as people were either coming in, called in, or brought in for questions.
And he was still in this area at the time, correct?
Yes.
And he came voluntarily?
Yes.
And he submitted to your questions?
Yes.
Did you get the impression that he was being dishonest during that interview?
You know, I mean, this was, you know, Mr. Peterson, we do interviews in two different ways. There are interviews and then there's interrogations. And this wasn't a pressing interview. This was a contact interview.
Certainly.
And it was just simply like a conversation like me and you were having. It wasn't a pressing interview like I knew that he was lying to me. I mean, it was just finding out where he was.
Yeah, I mean, but when you go out to interview someone who has come on your radar and you're trying to ascertain information, I mean, isn't it normal for you as a law enforcement officer to try to make some determination as to whether or not what they're telling you is credible?
Sure. I mean, we gather information and then we're going to follow it up by what he told us, seeing if I can, or somebody's going to run down what he told us.
Certainly.
Via his interview. But as far, this wasn't like I was an accusatory interview of him at the time. It was simply, did you know her? How did you know her? And where the last time you were with her?
And there were some aspects of that interview that apparently you took serious, because I believe you indicated that he told you the name of Derek.
Yes, sir. I mean,
I'm sorry, please.
In this interview, there would have been notes taken, and if I was asking him a question, most likely Tim would have been taking notes, and if Tim was talking to him, I'll take notes, because most of the time the interviewer is going to concentrate on just talking to the suspect. It's like I said, I wouldn't say he was a suspect at the time, because this was a contact interview. He was somebody that had recently been with her or contacted her, and we were just trying to ascertain what that contact was.
Well, I mean, you know, in this case, Mr. Tellis was being questioned about a young lady who had died a horrific death just 3 days prior to.
Well, we questioned hundreds of folks the same way.
You questioned hundreds of
I mean,
those?
we questioned, I don't know how many people we questioned. I mean, there were many, many interviews done in this case. Everybody that we could find had ever been in contact with it.
Fair enough. Now, also during this interview, he indicated that, and please, Major Thompson, if I misstate some of your testimony, please correct me. It's not intentional. You indicated that he met Ms. Chambers through Keisha Meyer.
Yes.
Okay. And when you say he met her through Keisha Meyer, do you recall anything about that contact?
I think Keisha and Jessica were friends, and they hung out together a lot. Of course, naturally, the M&M store is right there close to everything in Cortland, and it's the only thing in Cortland. So, and if he knew Keisha prior to that, saw Jessica and Keisha together, that would have been my assumption of how he said, I met her through Keisha.
Okay, now Ms. Myers testified yesterday. She said that Jessica introduced her to Quentin. Would that comport with the information that you obtained during this first interview?
No.
So, during the first interview, it was your understanding that Keisha introduced Mr. Tellis to Jessica.
I guess you could say it that way. He said he met her through Keisha Meyer. So I guess introduction, you know, I think in his interview he said he met her through Keisha Meyer, that Keisha gave him Jessica's cell phone number, and that's how they began communicating.
Now, you also indicated that, and I have a note here saying sex. Did he indicate during this initial interview that he had had sex with Jessica Chambers?
He told us that he had sex with her one time.
Okay. He did not, isn't it true that he didn't indicate that he had had sex with her on December the 6th?
He never said he had sex. He said I had sex with her one time.
Did he actually specify a date?
I don't know, sir. It wasn't a specific date. He just said that they had sex one time previously.
Now, you also indicated that Mr. Tellus says that at the time of the crime, he was with Mike and Shigard. I know those are Big Mike and
Yes,
Shigard.
that would be Michael Sanford and Terrence Shigard.
Okay. What was his understanding at the time of this interview as to the time of that crime?
He would have been given the timeline, I'm sure, whether it was myself or Investigator Douglas, of where were you at, probably between 5 and 8, or whatever the time that would have been late. As far as the actual how the question was asked 3 years ago, I'm not sure. It would have been a timeline type of interview.
Did you keep any notes from this conversation,
Yes.
Detective? And do you have those notes?
You should have them. I provided a copy, or there should be a copy in the file.
I do not have any notes from the first interview. Well, I've got his report. You've taken a look at your report,
Yeah.
and you indicated that at the time of the crime, he indicated that, and on your testimony, I'm trying to clarify that, you indicated that at the time of the crime, that he was with Big Mike and Shigard.
Yes,
Did he indicate that he was with Big Mike on December the 6th, or did he give you a specific time that he indicated that he was with them?
as I said, Mr. Peterson, it would have been a timeline interview because he had told us that they had ridden around that morning, and then he had went back home, and that it was later in the afternoon when he had been with Big Mike and Terry in the sandbox.
Okay. Well, so do you recall the timeline you gave him? Can I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Please, Counsel, that's a copy of the report you generated. Is it not?
It is.
Okay, and is there a timeline indicated in that report that would have been conveyed to Mr. Tellus during this initial interview?
No, it's a summation of what our interview was. There's no times in it, no.
Isn't it possible that Mr. Tellus told you on this particular case that he was with Big Mike and Shigard on December the 6th?
I don't believe that, no.
What is the timeline? Do you have a timeline as you sit here today as to when Ms. Chambers would have been set on fire? Do you know that as we sit here now?
I mean, it would have been, the exact time she was set on fire? No.
Okay, so if you don't know the exact time that she was set on fire, how could Mr. Tellus have told you that he was with them during that time? Because that's the crime we're here talking about, correct?
Yes, sir.
The crime we're talking about is actually setting Jessica Chambers on fire, correct?
Yes.
So if you don't know the timeline as you sit here testifying today, how can Mr. Tellus have told you that he was with Big Mike and Shigard during that time?
Well, based on the time the call come in and the burning of the car, there would have been a timeline laid out. I mean, it wouldn't have took the car 5 or 6 hours to burn like that. So that's where the timeline would have been developed.
So an approximate timeline?
Yes.
So he gave you his location or his whereabouts at an approximate time?
Yes.
Okay. May I approach you? I need
You
to
may.
retrieve my report. You mentioned Bo Scales. Who is that?
Dr. Bo Scales is the owner and operator of Scales Biological Laboratory.
Okay, that's the owner of Scales. I wanted to make sure that that's the person who actually did the DNA testing here.
I'm not sure if he actually.
Well, I mean his company, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Now, you indicate also in your report, Major Thompson, that, and we saw that this morning, the car was a black Kia, and it was processed by the Mississippi Crime Lab and agents of the ATF.
Yes.
Tell me, explain to the jury what you mean by the car being processed.
Well, I mean, because the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations was involved, they would have sent their crime scene unit to collect any evidence that they might have found from the car, which naturally would have consisted of debris from the floorboard, because it wasn't a whole lot left to collect. I believe there were, well, the crime scene unit would have to testify exactly what was collected out of the car.
So,
but it would be them photographing, the processing will be photographing the car, searching the car for any viable evidence, and then collecting that evidence and submitting it to the crime lab.
okay. So they took whatever they took out of the car and sent it to the crime lab for processing.
Yes.
Now, as I understand it, you may not be able to answer this question, but there was an accelerant identified as gasoline.
I think that testimony should probably come in out from somebody other than me. I didn't test anything for accelerant.
Okay. Well, your report indicates that the evidence was sent to the ATF lab and samples came back positive for the accelerant gasoline. Do you recall?
If you're asking me if I got a report from somebody at the ATF,
Yes.
yes, that would be in my report, yes, sir.
Certainly. I'm just trying to clarify some of the information in here. And if you need to, I can allow you to review it.
No, I mean, if you're telling me it's in my report that I received a report and accelerant being gasoline was used, I would have received a report from that, but I'm saying that I didn't test anything for accelerant.
Certainly. And now, are you aware of, and you may not know the answer to this, are you aware of what item contained gasoline?
I don't know, I would have, if I received a report, it would have said whatever was tested, but I don't know what item they tested. As far as the specific item they tested, I'm not sure. I don't know whether it could have been, debris from the floorboard that would have came from the car. It could be numerous things that could have come from the car, but as I said, I didn't collect it, sir, and I didn't test it. I'm just going off of a report provided to us.
Certainly. Now, Quentin Tellers never denied that he was with Jessica Chambers on December the 6th, did he?
No.
He told you he was with her?
Yes.
Okay. And he told you that they being Miss Chambers, Miss Myers, and himself were turning blocks.
I think he termed it probably cutting blocks, but the same thing, yes.
Cutting blocks. Did he say whose car they were in during this time?
I would assume they were in Jessica's, because she would have been the only one that had a car in her own possession. That would be an assign. I'm sure he told us it was in Jessica's car, but if he was even there, he just said they were together cutting blocks, and my assumption from the other interviews would be that she and Meyer probably picked him up.
Now, you indicated that through the course of your investigation, no Eric or Derek became viable suspects, and that you explored about 15 of them.
Myself and other investigators, yes.
Certainly.
That was asked as a broad question to me, but I didn't explore every one of them, no, sir.
Certainly. You're aware of them being explored.
Many of them were explored, yes.
I'm sorry.
By various agencies.
Did you explore any of them?
I know that I talked to Derek Holmes.
Derek Holmes.
Yes.
Anyone beyond Derek Holmes?
None of the other ones stick out to me. As I said, this was done in groups and teams, but it was, probably 30 or 40 of us working on this case, and they would pair them up, and everybody was doing interviews.
Certainly.
Be it ATF or MBI, FBI. I mean, we had U.S. Marshals. Everybody was going out and talking to folks.
Certainly. And Major Thompson, I'm just curious about the Good, because you had some participation in this investigation, correct?
Yes,
I'm just trying to ascertain the extent of your participation. So you spoke with Derek Holmes.
yes,
And that's the name that you got from Mr. Tellis.
yes.
Did you, as you sit here today, do you recall any of the other Erics that would have been local to this area?
There were, like I said, there were several of them, and just in our talking, I know that there were 15 or more. I think Derek Holmes was probably the only one that I talked to. Like I said, because it was a bunch of us going out and doing interviews at the same time.
Okay.
And that information would be funneled back to the DA's office or however it was being compiled. But I do believe that Derek Holmes was probably the only one that I talked to. I'm not sure that that was the only one, but it's the only one that sticks out in my mind now.
Now, Major Thompson, Mr. Tellis was interviewed multiple times.
Yes,
Are you aware of that?
yes.
Was the December the 10th interview the only interview that you actually participated in?
Yes.
Okay. Now, have you actually gone out to the crime scene other than this morning?
Yes, sir. I've been out there a couple of times.
Okay. And what was the purpose of those visits?
Sometimes it was, most of the time it was to take news media out there and show them.
Certainly. On any of those other visits, was there any additional evidence that would have been collected by you?
No, sir.
Was there any additional evidence that would have been collected by someone under your direction?
Not to my knowledge, no, sir.
Certainly. Well, if it was...
Other than the, notwithstanding the search and rescue that you talked to that somebody might have collected evidence on,
Certainly.
after that, I'm not aware of any.
Certainly. Now, what about M&M? We went to that store, M&M Girlies.
Yes.
Why do they call it Girlies, do you know?
Yes, sir. But growing up here and being here for almost 40 years, Mr. Gurley used to own that store, and it was a community store, and had been Gurley's for years until it was sold, and then they changed the name to M&M Grocery.
Okay. So, we were there this morning.
Yes.
Did part of your investigation cause you to go to Girlies?
I don't think I went there. I know various other investigators went to Gurley's, viewed video, and then I think they actually finally collected the video equipment.
Certainly. But you've never actually collected any information from Girlies?
No, sir.
Okay, so I mean, any evidence collected would come through someone else?
Yes.
Now, let me ask you the same question about Mr. Tellis's home and the shed that sits out front, that we also visited this morning. Have
No.
you ever been to that location?
I've been there, but I've never collected any evidence from it.
What was the purpose of your visit there?
Well, I've been to Mr. Tellis's house and talked to his family before.
Okay.
And they actually rode with me to an interview that was conducted by somebody else.
Okay. Was that the only reason you would have visited his residence? You didn't go to his residence and take any pictures or anything of his house or the shed or? Okay.
No.
How's the court's indulgence? Is it still working? Okay. Mr. Thompson, I asked you earlier about the 15 Erics that were initially identified. Do you recall that question?
Yeah, that would have been an approximate 15. It
An
could have been
approx-
less, could have been more.
Was there a list that you're aware of that would outline those Erics that were investigated and excluded by this task force?
I don't have it. I don't know of one. I'm not going to say that there's not.
Okay. You're not aware of one?
No, sir.
Okay. The 15, was that just a rough guess?
Yes, sir. I mean, that was, from talking to other investigators through the investigation, I don't want to give you an exact number because I don't know. I mean, there might have been some that were interviewed that I don't know about. I don't want to tell you that because I don't have a numbered list.
Now, there was a war room set up,
Yes,
and where you all basically was a headquarters while you were conducting this investigation. Now, this investigation, prior to Mr. Tellis's indictment, spanned about 14 months. Is that correct?
14 plus, yes, sir.
Was all of that was all of that stuff kept in that war room?
No, sir.
Okay.
Not the entire time, no, sir.
Now, did you ever speak with Mr. Dixon about the crime scene collection? Lieutenant Dixon, or?
No, sir. Not that I mean, I'm sure I reviewed the evidence list, but as far as speaking with him about the actual collection, no, sir. I reviewed the evidence list.
Then you would have reviewed any report that would have been generated from that?
Yes, I'm assuming that I would have, if you tell me which report you're referring to.
Just the report that would have indicated any items that would have been collected at the crime
Yeah,
scene?
the evidence list, yes.
I was just wondering if you all discussed it. I believe you indicated earlier that you would have seen that report.
I would have, the evidence list that would have been generated by what was collected would have been a part of this case file that I would have reviewed.
Lieutenant Wood, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I meant to say, I'm asking the court's indulgence once again. There's a store. Your Honors, in the interest of not tripping over that again, can I say we tender the witness from this location?
Thank you. Now, do the rest.
Just a couple of questions, Mayor. You kept mentioning a war room. Just so the jury knows, you have a large conference room at the Pinal County Sheriff's Department. Is that correct?
Yes,
And pretty much this conference room, was it entirely dedicated to this particular investigation during that time frame?
for a while, yes, sir. That was where all the outside agencies assisting would set up.
And we don't have enough do you have enough offices for all the investigators you had there?
No way.
Now, you mentioned when you first started and got back on that Monday and all these agencies got together, is that correct?
Yes,
And you mentioned splitting up in teams. And would you agree with me, we had to get our ducks in a row?
yes,
And you had to delegate responsibilities.
yes,
And he was asking, and part of those responsibilities probably would have been that search and rescue.
yes,
And you testified that that might have occurred later in the week.
yes.
Now, he asked you about the evidence collection from the car. There was also evidence collection on the scene, is that right?
Yes,
And Mr. Peterson asked you about ATF processing some evidence and finding gas.
yes,
Are you aware of some items from the scene that also came back positive for gas?
yes,
Part of those items be clothing.
yes,
back to the statement that Quentin Tellis gave you. I got a couple of questions about it. Mr. Peterson asked you, did Quentin Tellis admit they had sex one time?
Yes.
Actually, what did he tell you when you first asked?
He was asked the question if they'd ever been intimate. He said no, and then he said, well, we did have sex one time.
Okay. And Big Mike, we referred to, Terrence Shegog, are you aware he has a nickname?
I am.
And what is that nickname?
Tootie?
And based on your report, that is what he told you during the time of the fire.
Yes.
Cortland's a small area, is that right?
Yes.
It was fully broadcast when Jessica was set on fire, is that correct?
Yes.
Finally, Mr. Peterson asked you if you knew, or excuse me, did Quentin Tellis admit to you that he was with Jessica on December 6, 2014?
Yes.
And what time did he tell you was the last time he saw Jessica?
Before noon.
So did he admit to you that he was with her between 5:30 and 8 o'clock on December 6, 2014?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor. I would ask this witness be found excused.
All right. Mr. Thompson, you're found excused, sir. You may return to duty, remain in the courtroom. Your choice, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Counsel, approach, please. Beginning of this trial that everything would be done to attend to your comfort, and it will be. And I want to just know from you on a show of hands, do you all feel like you could go a little longer today? I've been told that if we took a few more witnesses, that it would considerably shorten our time here tomorrow and maybe go a long way toward finishing the testimony the next day or so. So do you feel like you're in a position to go forward today a little more? Yes, sir? All right. All right, let's do this. I'm going to let you take a brief recess and refresh yourself, and then when you're ready, let the bailiff know, and we will reconvene court, okay? All right.
Remain seated.